When in Rome, do as the Romans do. That means if you're looking to write a specific genre of music, you have to embrace how that genre is put together. So, if you're wanting to write authentic hip hop music, chances are you're going to be looking at the world of samples. We're going to talk about that and talk about the plugin that I recently discovered that enabled me to incorporate some long dormant DJ skills on my week 42 vlog check-in. What is up, everybody? This is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining me for my week 42 vlog check-in. If this is your first time, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy that you found me however you found me. This is my week 42 check-in for my 52 cues, where I am committing to writing at least one cue per week for the entire year and coming onto YouTube and talking about it, talking about the challenges, talking about things that are going on in the industry, talking about the cue itself. So I'm going to be doing a breakdown of this cue that we're listening to right now. It's called Throwdown Showdown, and it uses all samples. There are 0 virtual instruments in this cue. It's all using samples. If you want to skip over the vlog portion and get right to the cue breakdown, you can check out the information in the description below. Before we get started, I do want to give a special word of thanks to my Patreon patrons whose support keeps things going on here. Lots more information about my Patreon at the end of the video. So, like I said, this cue is called Throwdown Showdown. It uses all samples. And before I do the breakdown, I want to talk about the revelation that I had. And I'm no stranger to hip-hop. I have written a lot of hip-hop, but I firmly believe that if you are wanting to write authentically in a certain style, then you have to embrace how that style is put together. And that brings us to using samples. Now, using samples can be a really hot topic because for a long time, samples were kind of stolen, right? They were incorporated, they were ripped off of older records, and that created all kinds of copyright issues. And I don't even want to get into the legality nor even the ethics behind all of that. That's not what I'm here to talk about. But let's just say it's safe to assume that as production music composers, any samples that we want to incorporate should be legally licensed and legally obtained. And I obtain nearly all of my samples through Splice. I really like Splice. I think they have a really good thing going on. I know that there was some weird bad press about one artist paying homage to the Quake soundtrack. And then that was like, hey, these sounds sound too similar. That artist like totally owned it, fessed up to it, and said, I didn't intend to rip it off, credited the original author. And now I believe all of the proceeds from that sample library goes to that composer. And it might have actually have been pulled off, but that was an isolated incident. So Splice kind of got their name dragged through the mud, and I've seen them get bagged on in forums as, oh, they steal samples. And so I'm not here to talk about like the ethics of all of that. I use Splice. Where we can get into trouble, and trouble that I've talked about before on the channel, is using loops in production music can create lots of content ID problems for libraries, who use algorithms to figure out where cues are placed. Does it make error here? Does it make error there? There's systems in place that helps to identify those. And so loops and samples, to a lesser degree, can give false triggers for that. And so I'll have a link to that video that you can check out. It'll be floating around up here. So you can click on that. But I want to talk about using samples, specifically using sample chopping. And that brings me to the plugin that I found that is exactly what I was looking for. Now, I'm no stranger to sample chopping. And in case you don't know, sample chopping is where you load in a sample, usually a loop or a phrase, and then you go in and you chop it all up and you mangle it, you repitch it, reverse it, and all of that, and you create something new from that. That is intrinsic into how hip-hop was formed in the 70s and 80s, using samples, chopping them up and creating something new. I don't want to get into the debate on whether that's composition. I don't want to get into the debate on whether you think that's art. But I don't think it's any less art than I think someone who makes a mosaic or someone who makes stained glass. That's how I think of hip hop producers. They didn't smelt the glass, but they have all of these pieces and they create an entirely new picture based off of the fragments and pieces of something else. And that, I think, is a very beautiful thing. And if you're a production music composer and if you want to get into the hip hop space, especially the hip hop space that branches beyond, trap and that kind of thing, then you have to embrace sampling and you have to embrace how samples are used. And one of the big ways that samples are used, like I said, is chopping, taking the sample and chopping it up, mangling it, pitching it, reversing, whatever. Plugins have been able to do this for a while. Before, in Logic, it was the EXS24 sampler, which was a real bear to use. Then they recently updated it with the Quick Sampler. Reason has the redrum and or red drum or the Rex player, and so all of these things exist and have existed to make chopping easier. Let's put a pin in that. Let's back up, talk a little bit of history. When I washed out of college the first time, I got heavy into DJing, specifically production using Reason, using Acid Pro, using Fruity Loops when that was a thing, before it became FL Studio and kind of started to go toe to toe with some of the big DAWs. And one of the things that I did as a DJ was I recognized early on, and this would have been like 2002, 2003, as early as 2002. I realized early on that the laptop and the computer was where DJing was going. And so my DJ rig consisted of one Newmark TTX deck that I had all of these records like that. There were just like sounds and chops, and I would do scratching, like DJ Qbert type turntablism on my deck. I didn't do any mixing on my deck. Instead, I used Tractor Studio. And to Tractor Studio, I had connected a MIDI controller, because a 2-octave MIDI controller had enough controls to manipulate the deck A and deck B. And I had mapped all of the keys for syncing, chopping, creating in points and out points. And what I would do as a DJ, usually acid jazz, trip hop, kind of mellow, beat-driven groove type stuff. Wasn't really kind of 4 on the floor trance and ravey music like that. It was much more chill. Lo-fi is what they call it now. But I would create real-time chops. I remember one I did live at a Christmas concert at Visible Music College. Was I took the Christmas Time Is Here and remixed that live with the monologue from Linus. The Behold, there came before that, right? Like when he says, lights please. And so I created a real-time remix chop using the MIDI controller to manipulate the wave file in Tractor Studio. And I did that a lot, and I really, really enjoyed it. But as I got deeper into being a drum professor and finished my undergraduate, finished my master's and all of that, the DJ stuff kind of fell to the wayside. I got more heavily into production and composition, and then later production music, that I was never, ever really happy with any of the chopping, the sample chopping that I did, because my skills, I was so wired for the way that a DJ would manipulate the wave file. Until I recently stumbled upon Serato Sample. Serato is actually a competitor to Traktor. Serato is made by Serato. Traktor is made by Native Instruments. They have competing live DJ systems. Serato Scratch, I think, is what it's called for Serato. It's called Traktor for Native Instruments. But Serato has taken that DJ engine and made a flippin' plugin out of it. And I am so excited about it. I'm not sponsored by Serato or anything. I was watching a video on vocal chopping just because I know that I need to get better at it. And I was like, okay, let's just watch some technique videos. And the guy on the video, I forget what even video it was, says, I use Serato Sample. And I'm like, ears perked up. Serato, like the company that makes scratch software and DJ software. And behold, Serato Sample. Serato did the thing that I wish had existed 15 years ago when I was transitioning out of my DJ work into my production work. And I want to talk a little bit about it and talk about why I'm so flippin' excited about it. Again, I'm not here to sell you on it. I'm not going to like put a code in I'm not going to do any of that. But this entire cue uses all samples, the vast majority of them. I mean, I've got a few one-shots down here, but anything you see basically from here up is all samples manipulated in real time using Serato Sample. I'm just really, really geeked out about it. And when I first opened it up and when I saw it, I recognized immediately what this is. This is the DJ engine that I had been looking at for years in Traktor, complete with little quick keys that I can program myself that I was doing in 2001, 2002, 2003, 4, 5, and mapping them onto a MIDI keyboard. And here is a plugin that does it for me. And so it enables me to take a sample like this and this is a sample I picked up from Splice. I'm able to pitch it. I'm able to pitch. Right, so it keeps going from there. It's a really long sample, but I'm able to go in and create individual points and edit points that then and by the way, I'm using my let me go kind of more full screen here. I'm using this guy. This is my MPD 18 and let me turn this onto this mode here. Whoops. There we go. So it's playing them all. But and let me actually turn it off to poly here. All right, so and that became this line. Which is the primary hook for the cue I'm going to be talking about a little bit later. And again, I'm not here to like sell you on Serato Sample, even though I think if you are at all interested in sample-based hip-hop production, it's a no-brainer. It's not even that expensive. I think it's like $90 or $70 or something like that. My bigger point is I found a tool that I can use that uses skills that I already knew and unlocked a whole world that had been dormant. All of those DJ skills that I had honed had been dormant because I hadn't found a system, a workflow, software that worked for me. And I've tried I've tried the MPC, I've tried a Machina, I've tried Ableton. I even have like over here, it's why I have this guy, right? Because I'm like, I knew in my brain what this should sound like. I just couldn't find the tool that unlocked it for me until this Serato sample. So I really like it. And when using loops or when using samples, it is important that you chop them up, that you repitch them, that you make them so that there's something original. It's not just, the loop. Something original, so it won't mess around with the content ID. And you have gone in and manipulated the sounds so that they sound much more like yours. And that's something that this software does enable me to do. I can go in, I can time stretch individual notes. Go in, time stretch. If I wanted to change this key, and I use it for loops, but I also use it for individual notes. I've got some claps that I've loaded in. Here are my claps in the Serato Sample, and it's just a clap sound. And whoops, it's not. I could turn it into keyboard mode here, which is very cool as well. And like I said, I'm going to be doing a full breakdown. I'm going to go through each of the samples and play those for you here in just a minute. But I'm really excited about it, as you can tell. And the samples are chopped up, manipulated. It has this old school kind of late 90s, early 2000s vibe, which I sense, like I feel that listening to hip hop, especially production music hip hop. I feel like we're returning to that breakbeat sample based cues. And it's going to be really important for us producers to be able to roll with that and do it to where we're not tripping up the library, we're not getting into copyright claim issues, and it still sounds authentic. It still sounds authentic to the genre, the sampled sound. So, with all that, what about you? Have you found some tools that kind of unlocked some dormant skills? Are you a hip hop producer? And I would love to hear the tools that you use. Do you use Serato Sample? Are there some other things out there that I just don't know about? I love the fact that Serato Sample enables me to bring in loops, to bring in samples, chop them up very easily, and not just not do it all in audio, but not just layer loops. Okay, because that's a dead end. That's ultimately a cul-de-sac of creativity. It's not going to get us where we need it to be. It's not sustainable long term. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. And so with that, let's take a listen to Throwdown Showdown, a cue that uses all sampled sounds, no virtual instruments. We're going to listen to it and talk about it on the other side. That was Throwdown Showdown, and I really can't overstate how difficult it would be to recreate this sound, A, using all virtual instruments, or B, creating all of them using virtual instruments, and then kind of exporting them, bringing them all out as waves, and then bringing them all back in. That would be enormously time consuming, very, very, very challenging. And, as production music composers, we're all about output. It's not a quantity over quality, but you've got to have a quick turnaround. And so being able to leverage these tools in brand new ways is not only, it not only honors the way that hip hop is put together, but it also allows you to have a much quicker, faster, more productive output, in my opinion. And I'm sure I'd love to hear you guys in the comments. I know there are composers out there. I see them on the forums, and they just bag on this. First of all, there's no reason to do that, man. The table is big enough for all of this, for all of us, and so there's no reason for any kind of elitism or anything. And if that's you can take that to another YouTube channel and unsubscribe. I'm totally fine with that. If you think this is all hot garbage and that I'm some hack or something, I'm prepared to be okay with that. It's not the fight that I have any interest in fighting. I'm not here to debate that. But as composers and production music composers, by the way, if you're still with me, thanks, appreciate you. But as production music composers, we have to figure out ways that we can have a steady output. So all right, so let's look at the track. And starting with that horn sample that I mentioned at the beginning, this is the horn sample that sounds the whole sample. I'm not gonna play the entire thing. Right, and what I love about this sample is that big kind of brassy sound, and it already sounds really processed, compressed. The reverb, all of that is already baked in. And so when I use it as a sample, you hear how the sample starts and stops? Those are the details that are really authentic to making sample-based hip-hop sound the way it does. And this is where virtual instruments really, really miss the mark. Because instead of it sounding like a chopped up sample, which sounds like hip hop, it sounds like an orchestra playing these parts. And it sounds too realistic, for lack of a better term. It just sounds too real. So I've got that horn part. I've also layered it in the second phrase with an octave up. Just the same plugin, the same sample, just octave increase. And I also layered underneath it an octave below, the 8 VB. And Serato does a really good job of stretching. I mean, yes, there are artifacts there. It's not the cleanest thing, but I don't want the cleanest thing. I want it to sound like sample-based hip-hop. And so Serato is really good at stretching, so it doesn't sound too short. Or it doesn't sound way too long. The high note sounding too short. Blend those all together. It just sounds like a big, fat, gnarly brass band. All right, and so then I have a wah guitar, and that wah sample sounds like this. And yes, I have a guitar back there. I have recorded parts like this, and I could have recorded my own part and then done all of the effects and then brought it in, but I don't believe I have to. And so that part becomes this. This is the mosaic. This right here, what you're seeing, all the little chops, this is the stained glass being made. And for me, Serato Sample completely made that so easy, tapping into my DJ brain. And I know the quick sampler, I know, You could do all of this with like battery or the Machina, but it just didn't click for me. Then we have my bass line. And this bass line, that's the whole loop. I have a bass right over there. I can absolutely record this if I wanted to. But bringing in an actual sample, that's what makes the style really, really work. Next, get into my drums. Right, here's the drum loop itself. With all the chopping. This lo-fi groove. The sample itself. Right? So the raw glass, the stained glass. I don't know. This it instrumentalizes, it virtual instrumentalizes these loops. And you hear that little break where it goes. That's desirable. Put all these together. Throw on some one-shot claps loaded in. This top lo-fi, it's got this. It's really this super dirty sound. By itself. Again, the glass pieces, the stained glass. Put all of those together with a crash one shot, some other, a downer. Oh, I did have one other. I brought in a scratch. Actual, like a DJ scratch. One shot. A one shot, this big kind of reverby impact. And then the last instrument is this synth lead line. Again, stained glass. Now, if I would just take that loop and drop it into my cue as is, then that would absolutely trip up a content ID system. But once you bring it in, you chop it around, it's repitched, it's moved, then we're in really good shape. So the fun becomes of crate digging. You know, there's a reason old school DJs would go to record stores and spend hours and hours and hours just looking for nuggets with a finely tuned sense of what can be done with a sample. Beyond just laying a loop, but how can I chop this up? How can I turn this into something new? And that is the real power of sample-based hip-hop. That's why it's here. That's why it's here to stay. That's why we're still talking about it 40 years, 50 years later. Because there's power in that. There's power in making something new from the, I don't mean to sound emotional, but from the broken pieces of something else. I think there's a there's a much more poignant history lesson to be had there that that goes beyond this channel. But yeah, nothing but love. So as far as the form of the cue, very basic production music form. A little bit of intro, introduce the hook, build, little breakdown, introduce the secondary hook, build that, bring the primary hook back, right? Strip some things out, and then take it home. And then ending on a big final chord, big button. There's my last chord. There's my final button. I did use kind of a melodic fragment, which I do all the time, like an A, B, B with a melodic fragment, A, and then A plus B. That's what's going on here. These are melodic fragments. And granted, I did throw a little bit of reverb on there just to make the ends of the sounds not sound quite so chopped, but even then they still sound pretty aggressively short. In context, you don't really notice it. So yeah, the publisher loved it. I really enjoy it. I'm super proud of this, and I'm even more jazzed about finding a tool that excites me. And if you can find a tool, a plugin, it doesn't have to be this plugin. It could be a DAW. It could be, I don't know, a flute or a melodica. I don't care. But if you find something that sparks you, that gets your muse all ignited, then whatever that is, I firmly encourage you to go for it. Go make music for it. This cue. This wasn't even like for an order. This wasn't for another project. I just saw Serato Sample. I'm like, whoa, ding, ding, ding. Light bulb moment, started creating something. And before I knew it, 4 hours went by. This cue was done. I sent it off to the publisher. And now the publisher wants a whole album of this now. He wants like 10 more tracks. Let's make an album because this is hot business. And that's the way it goes, isn't it? Isn't this supposed to get you excited? Aren't you supposed to enjoy your music? I hope you do. But I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts about using samples. Again, don't be a hater, be a celebrator. But thank you so much for joining me. Do leave the comments below. I make every effort. I definitely read them, and I make every effort to respond to all of the comments that we get. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this channel would not be possible without the support of my Patreon patrons. So don't thank me, thank them. Their support keeps the channel going. If you want to be a patron, it's only $1 a month, and you get access to my weekly music production live streams. And yeah, I would love to have you. And if you just want to enjoy the channel, you don't have to subscribe if you don't want to. You don't have to be a patron. You can just receive, and I'm totally okay with that. But that's going to do it for me for my week 42. I hope you had a good week 42, and I hope you have a stellar week 43. I'll see you next time. Until then, peace.